Brad Voris with that little retailer in Bentonville, Arkansas. And since I'm not a vendor today, I can actually say it's Walmart. Walmart doesn't like for vendors to say their name, so that's why I say that little retailer in Bentonville, Arkansas, so people know who I'm talking about. And this is, again, because we talk about this is track 6. It's not CD or ABC. This is DEF, and Brad's going to talk about threat modeling with MITRE ATT&CK framework. So Brad has been working in the information technology and cybersecurity for over 24 years. He began his career in 1999 when he spent 15 years building a solid foundation in the IT field. In 2016, thanks to suggestions of a colleague, Brad began studying to obtain his CISSP security certification. After passing the exam and officially entering the security field, Brad continued his upward trend through the acquisition of an array of certifications, including CISSP, CISM, CCSP, CCSK, Network Plus, MCP, MTA, VCA DCV, NSE1, NSE2, NSE3, ACE, 100W-OPSEC, Trustee, AZ900, SC900, and a licensed private investigator for the state of Texas. Continued knowledge and high-level performance has led him to work with a list of enterprise organizations, including United Airlines, Texas Children's Hospital, and Walmart. He was quoted in the August 2017 issue of IS Decision magazine, commenting on the insecurities of Microsoft Active Directory, amen, stating audit logs are in the form of event logs with specific error messages, some of which require group policy configuration changes on the domain controller, default policy initially, and there's very limited logs. In order to get more data, you have to make a fair amount of changes to group policy. Very important. And you also typically have to have a third-party tool to get to said logs. Brad's accomplishments don't end at the workplace, though. He has co-authored 2 books in his field, Intrusion Detection Guide, Chapter 10, Compliance Frameworks, and Essentials of Cybersecurity, Chapter 8, Understanding Central Areas of Enterprise Defense. Brad continues to work in IT and cybersecurity while also sharing his knowledge and experience with others through mentorship program, where he gives guidance to up-and-comers seeking counsel in the field. Before his IT and security journey, Brad served in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service. And with that, I will hand it off to you, sir.
Can you hear me? Oh, wow, that is really loud. Okay. So today, we are going to embark on a journey, threat modeling with MITRE ATT&CK framework. I don't know how many of you have gone out and looked at MITRE's website and tried to figure out exactly what that was, what that looked like. That is probably one of the most overwhelming pieces of tech I have ever seen in my entire life. So before we get too terribly far into it, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles by Sun Tzu. I don't know if y'all are familiar with The Art of War, but that's a quote from that book. That really surmises and correlates especially well with information and cybersecurity. As we look at emerging threats, we look at trends, we look at threat actors and what they do. We're trying to understand their specific playbook. We're trying to capture what they do and provide security controls to help mitigate those, okay? So, I'm not gonna read all this. You did an awesome job reading my bio. But yeah, Brad Voris, a whole bunch of acronyms. I'm the lead information security architect over at Walmart, so if you wanna have conversations about that afterwards, we can. About 25 years experience between IT, IS. I don't wanna read all that. I just finished my undergrad. A lot of certifications. Again, yeah, I've been doing this for a very, very long time. Co-authored 2 books, yep. And for Peerless, if any of you know who Peerless was, they were one of the greatest communities for information and cybersecurity. And I also was a contributor for the cybersecurity or the Cloud Security Alliance's Zero Trust certification that they just recently released. I think it was earlier last year. And also a footnote, I am not an expert. All right, understanding. So let's make this simple. We need to understand threat modeling. We need to understand the components of attack. We need to understand and select a campaign, industry, threat actor, etc. We need to create a model, and then we're going to rock it. So this is what you're going to need. All right, so threat modeling. This is the de facto standard kind of description, a process for improving security by identifying vulnerabilities and threats based on known attack vectors of threat actors. So what exactly does that mean? What does it mean? I mean, we're trying to build scenarios. We're trying to build out cases to get a better understanding of what threat actors are doing and how we can mitigate the attacks that they do. What controls can we put in place? What levels of compliance do we have to adhere to? There's a whole bunch of links. This presentation is also going to be provided via my GitHub, so you can go back to these links. Again, most important things, knowing attack.mitre.org, knowing where the attack navigator is, and there's some additional training that's there as well. So, going back, look at this. How overwhelming is that? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Every single person, I'm sorry? Yeah, we haven't clicked on anything. This is the level of visibility that we have, and it's outstanding. But also, it is so overwhelming. I came into this probably about 2017, and I looked at it and I was like, what is that? It's a bunch of boxes with a bunch of text. It doesn't mean anything. How is this even a tool? What am I going to do with this? Well, let's figure it out. So we're going to look at the framework components. You got, you know, a tab at the top, new tab, kind of self-explanatory. You got a matrix control plane. You know, that pretty much makes everything pretty. You got your TTPs. These are your threats, tactics, and procedures. Basically exactly what those threat actors are doing within your environment, or to gain access to your environment, or to exfiltrate data from your environment. You got the attack tactics, this is the why, and then you have the attack techniques, which is the how. All this breaks it down. It's not difficult. It's just overwhelming when you first see it. It's a bit ridiculous. So now what are we going to do? Well, you know, this is Houston, right? Right? This is Houston? Yeah? Yeah, in Houston, what's like the primary industry that we have? Oil and gas. Yeah, so oil and gas, petroleum industry, right? Yeah, humidity, yeah, that too. I feel that right now. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to go in and we're going to use their search feature and we're going to search for campaigns because we want to look at existing campaigns that have been leveraged against that industry. Okay, so I do a quick search. Yeah, I like doing Control F. I'm old school. It's a lot easier than have to go and punch and stuff. But I'm doing a quick Control F for oil, and that makes it simple for me. I'm kind of lazy. So I picked 3 campaigns, basically a couple of threat actors that are listed, Night Dragon, C0021, and Operation Dust Storm. These are well-known campaigns. They have a very long trail, and they're very well documented through MITRE. Now I need to download those campaigns. When I download those, I get an option to download directly from those links from campaign as JSON files. I downloaded each one of them. Keeping in mind, we still have that big box of all of that stuff that we have to go through, all that data. Then we're going to go in and we're going to import each campaign. But you'll notice at the very bottom, upload layer version 4.4 is out of date. So even MITRE, being, you know, well, more or less a government entity, they can't keep their stuff straight either. We all have the same problem. Once that campaign data is imported, you get this full view from each campaign. I'm going to zip ahead a little bit. Now the most important thing, yeah, you've got these individual panes and they've got boxes that are selected with the exact tactics that have been used, the exact procedures that have been used from each one of these threat actors. Okay, it's kind of useful. At least you have a guide for each one of these. But what else can we do? So we want to go in and we want to kind of calculate this and see, are there any commonalities within these attack tactics? Any commonalities in the procedures that they use? Because ultimately, that helps us understand what we need to prevent, what we need to stop, or at least what we can try and mitigate. So we go in, we make sure we select the appropriate, right now I'm using enterprise attack. There are a lot of options. There's options for Windows, Linux, ICS, mobile. You go out to my GitHub, you'll be more than happy to see there's a whole bunch of good stuff out there for this. We go in and we select A plus B plus C. No, this is not Pythagorean theorem. This is not ABC conjecture. I promise there is no additional math that you need. This is very simple. Again, going back to it, we got so overwhelmed by all of that data when we need to make it simple. Look at that. So now, taking A plus B plus C, after the import, we get a very clear view of the commonalities on those attack patterns. We can see the ones that are in red have much higher value. They're much higher weighted. Again, they're common techniques used between those three campaigns. Comprehensive threat model of scenario. I'm going to read this word for word. Comprehensive threat model of scenarios based on known campaigns of threat actors targeting the petroleum, oil, and gas industries. That's very easy. It's very easy to see. Sure as hell isn't easy to say, but it's easy to see. It's a great opportunity. Now we've got visibility into their exact patterns of what they do. That's great. We know what threat actors are doing. We know their techniques. We know their tactics. We know their procedures. It's as if we have everything we need to help mitigate this risk, right? Well, except for budget. Probably all the tools that we need to be able to do that. Training for people, right? Yeah, we're probably missing all that too, but we'll do our best. But Brad, you charismatic gentleman, that would be me. Do I have to do this every single time, or can I export it, or can I get a copy of it? Yes, you can export it. You can take all that data that you've compiled based on each campaign, and you can export that to a JSON file, to an Excel file, to an SVG. So you got a nice, pretty, colorful picture that you can go take and sit down in front of, say, a handful of people in your team and say, these are the most common tactics that these threat actors are using within my industry, or based on my particular point solution, or my software. I can do this, and now they know. Well, we don't have mitigating controls for some of this. We're going to have to look into it. So what do we do with the data now? Well, you've embarked on this journey, and I know I'm getting pretty far ahead, but we've embarked on this journey. We build scenarios to test, to validate asset security posture. That's the whole purpose of this. We're looking at what we have, what can we protect, what they're doing, how can we protect against that. We determine gaps in our security controls. We look at what are the exact techniques that they use, what are the security controls that can help mitigate that, if there are any. In some cases, there aren't, other than additional training. We've got to get visibility. We integrate this function into design of security controls. Now that I know that some threat actor over in some location can do 4 or 5 things, and he's going to do those consistently. He's targeting a specific point solution. Knows exactly what his target is. He knows how to leverage scripting. He can automate his process and gain access to that system. Maybe it's something that we overlook. Maybe it's a Citrix system or an RDP system that's public-facing. We don't have tight enough security controls, but it's something that we have to have public visibility. We've got to have access to it. They know a way to exploit it, and they can automate that. We train our teams. I mean, ultimately, we take this information, we take this data, we pull it together, and we go to train our teams. We say, what do you know? What don't you know? This is what the threat actors are doing. I'm not trying to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's no FUD here. This is to help y'all realize that this tool is widely available. and it's easier to use than you think. It's not that overwhelming, except for that initial sticker shock of opening it up. Navigator can be tough, but it can also be really rewarding. Now that you've got that clear view, you can impress your friends. Because I don't know how many people look at me and go, man, I saw your presentation on MITRE threat modeling. That was really cool. All my friends think it was cool. No, they don't. All right. Literally short presentation, but I want to open this up. What do you have for questions?
I worked with MITRE for almost 6 years now.
Here.
I've worked with MITRE for almost 6 years now. In your opinion, should the lead be the architecture team or the red team?
Why can't it be both? Why can't we have both teams engaging together to utilize this type of information? I mean, to be honest, you're going to glean multiple things. How solutions are going to be put in place based on your architecture, based on capability, based on structure, based on regulatory compliance, based on how everything is. Your red team's just trying to break into it the majority of the time, or at least have, a clear path in the breaking into it. But why not have both of those teams to come together and have those discussions? I don't think that's I don't think it's just one or the other, to be honest. Especially if you have a small team, that gives them the opportunity to learn from each other.
I guess from my point of view, it's a different mindset. The architecture team knows where everything is, whereas the red team, in theory, yeah, that's right, visibility, right? Yeah. But the red team, they don't know where everything is, but they have a different mindset. It's an attack mindset. It's just the way of thinking, right? Yeah. That's why I said which team should be leading this initial discovery or mapping of the different techniques.
I mean, again, I'm going to go back to, I think everybody has to be involved. Now, I'm not trying to use that as a cop-out answer. Why I believe everybody has to be involved is because that makes us better security practitioners. We don't have to know how to do everything, but at least run through one time and get that visibility. Make a determination on what works best for your org. Because to be quite honest, not everything works for everybody, but getting everybody involved at least provides them that level of visibility and feedback. They may come back and say, you know what, I can't use this to design anything. It's not going to be helpful. But then again, they may look at it and go, oh, I didn't have a mindset of designing security controls and getting them implemented within my architecture and my infrastructure until I looked at this. I got a better feel for it. I got a better understanding of what threat actors do and how I can help mitigate that and kind of turn the perspective around. Because from a pen tester perspective, a red team perspective, that's what they're doing. They know those tactics. They know those techniques because they've been trained in them. But blue team architects, most of the time they don't. They build point solutions or they configure solutions. Hopefully not engineering, but a lot of times they're engineering solutions. I know I've been there. But it's one of the challenges that we all run into. Anything else? No? Cool. Questions? Any other questions? Come here. Here, you want to pass this down?
Yes, so my question is, once you get to create your threat model, what is like the best way that you will present this to the leadership? And how often does MITRE update their database on the information?
So I'll speak very loudly and clearly. This information gets updated very, very frequently. I would say probably once every couple of months, sometimes even more frequently than that. I mean, it's really as MITRE's getting information about threats and threat actors and campaigns, they're actively updating this information. So it gets updated relatively frequently. Now, each subset specifically, as it pertains to like ICS or mobile or Windows or Linux, they'll update those as those particular attacks go on and they get that information back. I'm sorry, what was your other question? Best way to present it to leadership? I wouldn't do it. You want to know why? Imagine going into leadership with a box, a bunch of boxes and some text in there. They don't want to see that. You know what they want to see? They want to see colorful graphs, They want to see, you know, charts with like green and red, and they want to see blue, and they want to see, you know, very small dollar signs. They want to know risk is being contained at least as much as it possibly can for the money that they're spending. You know, not exactly something I would bring to them, but as it pertains to security leadership, hopefully you've got good security leadership and they can look at that and go, okay, I understand what's going on here. I understand what the threats are. I understand what they're trying to accomplish and how they gain access to systems, how they exfiltrate data. I understand that. This is valuable based on our industry, or this is valuable based on our point solution. There's value in it, but it's also about the audience that you're trying to portray it to. It's like this, me presenting this to all of y'all. Some of y'all are gonna find this incredibly useful, and some of this, I'm certain at least half of you probably fell asleep. So there's always that where you have to grab that level of attention, but you have to have the right audience. And someone that's technical, that has that level of understanding, I think that really does help them. They get a really good understanding for what those techniques are, or they may already know. Maybe not all of them, because hell, I don't know all of them, but definitely good information. What else we got question-wise? We'll come to you after. Yeah.
How often are you doing this?
Now, probably significantly less than I should. So my role as an information security architect, well, lead information security architect at Walmart, is as I'm looking to design solutioning, this comes into play. I look at tactics, techniques, and procedures that are performed by threat actors around either specific point solutions or that's specific to my industry. That provides me with a very good, we'll say, 10,000-foot view, which being an architect, that's ultimately what I need is that 10,000-foot view. And I do work exclusively with our red team and a lot of our security engineering, which would be the blue team, to get a better understanding of what their concerns are, along with like my stakeholders, the people that are paying the bills. And then I move forward. So from a perspective of the frequency that I use this, I would say, as of last year, probably 5 to 10 times a month, as we're looking at replacing point solutioning, or we're doing application consolidation, rationalization, if you will, pretty frequently. Now, we're actually looking at solutioning that will automatically do this. There's some solutioning that's already out there. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to help endorse some of the vendors that are out there, because, hey, I'm not getting paid for that. But there are plenty of point solutions out there that can help you do this. Now, if you're coming from a small, medium business and you're just trying to find value, this is where it will shine through. You ultimately get that window that you can't really get anywhere else. You get to learn about those tactics, those techniques, those procedures, and how they get ingrained and how threat actors gain access to systems or people and work their way either laterally through a network or through holes or whatever. So it gives us that great level of visibility that we wouldn't normally have, especially for a small business, especially for a medium business. Enterprise businesses, in theory, the majority should have, we'll say, a better security posture than most because they've got regulatory compliance that they have to meet. They have certain obligations that they have to meet, in theory. That's not always the case, but
what differences have you found threat modeling with MITRE ATT&CK and without MITRE ATT&CK? And personally, have you identified any previously unknown or underestimated risks with MITRE ATT&CK?
So specifically identifying threats, I'll say this, that my role as an architect is primarily from the design perspective. So I look at solutioning and capability and how it needs to go in an org. I look at how we as like a technology company, propose solutioning, and that would be a web server, that would be a database backend, and I look at these attack techniques and I say, based on this information, this is what we should be doing. So the reality is, I'm not the one that's in the front lines going and finding and fighting, threat actors. This comes down more to, I'm implementing or making a recommendation to implement a solution that is a security control around whatever point solution that they being whoever technologists are, and making sure that they are implementing that. while we've got, depending upon the size of your org, if you use an MSSP or you have your own SOC, you utilize them in conjunction with this type of data so they know exactly what to expect. You're implementing logging, monitoring, especially around things that have, we'll say, mission critical data. When we start talking about mission critical data, PII, PCI DSS data, IP data, whatever it happens to be that's important to the org. HIPAA data, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Once you've got all that identified, it's a lot easier to say, okay, I've got these security controls in place and I've got this level of logging and monitoring to see who has access, who's taking files. DLP would be a decent example. And then pulling that information into, say, a SIM, if you've got the means of SOAR, and automating a level of automation, again, on that, to help mitigate that level of risk. So I know it's kind of an obfuscated deal, but again, it's not in my role, being an architect, that's what I do. Cool? Okay. Oh, all right.
Thank you. If you had a choice on data sources, what would be your favorite and why? So you got machine data, endpoint data, flow data, logs, packets, depending on budget. What's your choice?
My data of choice? Boy, that's an interesting question. I've been asked a lot of questions about my data of choice. I mean, structured data is awesome. It's consistent. You know where it is. It doesn't change. It's not like unstructured data where it's all over the place. You don't have appropriate controls for it. You don't have metadata tagging half the time. That in itself is just absolutely mind-boggling. In-user data now is significantly easier with things like M3, well, I'm not going to say that too loudly, but M365, where you've got that level of visibility into your data. There's meta tagging in it. You know the who's, the where's, the what's, the why. But I mean, honestly, structured data is where it's at. That's kind of my thing. Yeah, if I got a chance to go sit and run a packet sniffer and see what I can get, I would love to do that all day. But my role doesn't, I can't do both. I can only do so much. I got to speak to all of y'all.
When doing a threat model for a point solution, are you looking at a specific time frame of campaigns or a sample size to implement protections for specific TTPs? Or is that typically being done by your, I guess, SOC team, cyber threat intelligence team, or do you have your own specific criteria?
So when I'm looking from a design perspective, that's a little bit different. So from a design perspective, I'm usually looking for something that's relatively current. I'm not trying to go back to something that's 10, 15 years. I mean, I'll be honest. Yes, there is a level of relevance to that, but probably not much because those tactics have changed drastically. Technology is theoretically, well, let's be honest, in the majority of cases, technology has not changed that drastically. We're still doing the same stuff, the SOS, the same old stuff. So, yes, I'd say it's probably no greater than about 5 years, 10 years max. I mean, even that's pretty far. When I'm working with like our SOC and we're actually doing like an active investigation, which again, not my role, but I've been involved in at least some of it to provide a level of visibility, also to provide recommendations, which God would only know why they would want an architect to do that. But it's one of those things where you look, you see, you make comments, and really, is this something that is going to align with those specific tactics that are being used? Are those procedures well known? But now when we start talking about things like, a SIM and you've got, we'll say Sentinel, a lot of that's automated. You don't have to do that. They get that level of visibility up front. Again, every SIM is different, but at least in, we'll say, my employer's case, that's really the reality of it. Okay?
When the changes happens to the framework, do you have to completely redo the modeling or any tools to show the difference between the older model and the newer model?
I would definitely say yes. You're going to be redoing those models. I would not rely on those models for more than, I don't know, a couple of months. I mean, the reality is technology is changing so rapidly And even their website, I mean, I literally was using version 14 of this framework less than, I'd say, a month and a half ago. And then, oh yeah, when I'm about to do the presentation, they're on version 15. So trying to keep update and current is absolutely relevant, is absolutely important. You have that level of visibility, you know exactly what they're doing, you're able to apply because there's new techniques and new tactics and new procedures that they are using. That gives you a really good, all right, it's time to do this again. But I mean, the reality is when you're looking at solutioning, regardless of what it is, you really want to try and keep on the up and up when it comes to it. You want to know what's going on. You want to know what type of threats are going to be there. You want to know what really to expect. And that's ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. Okay?
Is there any API? Is there any API or anything to automate it?
That's all based on solutioning. So can that be done? Yes, through third-party solutioning specifically for MITRE, and there's a ton of vendors out there that do that. I won't name names. But yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Yep, one up here. And while we're walking back, I'll ask a question. What are your thoughts on using GPTs or AI modeling for the cyber threat intelligence pipeline processing?
I think those are awesome. I think they're a great opportunity for one, to leverage new tech, and two, to get different perspectives and visibility into what threat actors do. We're not the only ones using things like ChatGPT, Copilot. There are numerous, we'll say AI, Gen AI technologies that are out there that are able to leverage the exact same reverse technology that can go and pretty much develop as much code as they want to go and do as much damage as they want.
As an architect, where do you go looking for solutions to address any of those findings? Do you just beat up Google or come to conferences, or is there a magic website?
Man, I wish there was a magic website. I do. I mean, I'll be honest. So we'll go back to my current employer. So we look at capability, and we do capability road mapping. We look at solutioning and how solutioning equates out to capability. We look at how we might have 5 or 6 solutions for one particular capability. We'll say like MFA. Okay, I'm not going to name names again, but we look at that and we're like, all right, we need to start rationalizing this, consolidation. And one of the biggest problems that we have as an org is we've got so many things. There's so many bits and pieces. It's massive, yeah, and it's all about the level of cohesion that we have to have, but also taking into account as it pertains to the level of scale. So while organizations here talk about scale, and you might talk about 50, 100, 1,000 web servers, you might talk about a firewall, 20, 30 firewalls. I'm talking about 100,000. I'm talking about 500,000. I've got to keep that in the back of my mind from that perspective because, again, we ultimately have to think about scale and what that impact is going to be. So what do we do about capability? Conferences are probably one of the best places to go to get word of mouth, but also going and doing research and unfortunately using third-party providers like Gartner, because, necessary evil. Yes, I know, and a list of names is usually all I need. I can do my own research. I can find out. I can look at solutions and how they're going to fit roughly within our environment. I can meet with those teams. That way we're not siloed. We have those levels of discussions. We have our own process around that. We go to look at that capability and, can we replace the existing capability? And if we can, what can we do to make it better and more cost effective? Ultimately, it's going to get driven into logging. It's going to go to our SOC. We want to consolidate that as much as possible. We only want relevant data that goes in there, so we're going to do a lot of filtering. We're also going to make sure that as we're providing that level of data that it's relevant content, that it also provides a level of visibility that is good for the company. Because, ultimately that's important. But one of our key things is trying to meet that challenge of if there's capabilities, There's products within those capability scopes. We're meeting with vendors. We're doing the whole magic quadrant thing. I hate doing the magic quadrant thing. I swear it's horrible. We're going out and we're investigating other companies, and we also do acquisitions. We'll look at point solutionings, or we'll meet with, VCs that say, hey, we've got a particular solution, a particular capability that you don't have. Well, that's great. I've heard that before. Does it actually do that? Let's find out. Well, it's got AI and it's got ML and there's this and this. That doesn't really do anything. Let's be real. What does it do? And let's make sure that it's something that we can ultimately use, for one, to increase security posture, but two, to reduce cost and overhead. Because man, I don't know how many times I've had to go walk into a system and we've got on an endpoint, a server, a workstation, a POS machine. We've got an endpoint with an endpoint software, an endpoint software, an endpoint software, an endpoint software, endpoint software. Got to consolidate that. We have to look at that entire stack and do rationalization. But it's the same problem for every org too. How can we make the best with what we got, but also rationalize cost? And will it scale? Again, one of the most critical things.
Integrate and automate.
Yes, and
You have to do that out the gate.
automation is probably one of the biggest challenges at scale. Looking at, again, org size, looking at how things work, looking at how to get better integration within application, within system, getting visibility, how we can consolidate. A lot of things just don't talk well together. And when you start throwing in a monkey wrench of like zero trust, because unfortunately I'm kind of like the zero trust expert at work, it makes things that much more difficult because, now we've got to talk about how we can limit access controls and how we can limit just users and how we can enable policy and how we can do all of these things. For one, to make things more secure, but also to look good on paper, but also start reducing cost. Because again, we're trying to do that. So, sorry, you had something?
So one of the difficulties I have from doing threat models is the the side effect of control creep. You're building so many controls because of the models. From a practical standpoint, what have you found to be the best way to work engineering to not just operationalize the controls, but to decommission them as you found fit? What frameworks or techniques or whatever?
Man, that is an awesome question. I'll be honest. For us, this comes down to app rationalization. We really start looking at what we have from a capability standpoint. I mean, everyone needs to do this. What we have from a capability standpoint. And my recommendation is to build a matrix, bunch of boxes in Excel, and say, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, and I've got this. Why do I have all of this? It's a big problem, that application sprawl. Yeah, we need security controls, but the reality is, do we need security controls that overlayer themselves again and again and again? I get defense in depth. I really, really do. Okay, I'm an old school practitioner because I've been doing this BS for way, way too long. But one of the biggest challenges we run into is we need something for this, and we need something for this and this. And it really comes down to your particular use case and your requirements. Where I work, we have a ton of overlap. And right now, this year, our big emphasis is into consolidation and rationalization. So we are looking at what we have from a complete tech stack, specifically InfoSec, and how we can consolidate that. We look at our EDR solutions. We look at our identity and access management solutions. We look at things like DLP. Where can we consolidate some of these, rationalize those, and have less and spend less while still being able to provide a single pane of glass? And some of that requires customized development. We have the resources for that, but not everybody else does. And it's challenging, I get it. It's a lot like just trying to pick your battles when you're looking at what I want to spend. It's really hard because you look, I could go spend $50,000 on this, I can go spend $20,000 on this, $100,000 on this, but the reality is I got to get very, very key important things. I need to make sure that those are within scope and I'm protecting what the company thinks is important, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to say yes. So it's not easy. It's not an easy task. It's definitely a challenge even at scale. Like at Walmart, it's a humongous challenge. It's very, very difficult. but we're working through it, just like every other org. And it's, you know, a lot of the same issues that you hear, it's all about asset management. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, we all have the exact same problem. It does not matter what assets you have, you do not manage them well. No one does, okay? Nobody does. Okay, we have time for one more question.
Thank you. How does encryption affect your current job now? Is that a threat?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, from a design perspective, not really. So I have to make sure that we've got, you know, encryption based around our point solutions. I have to make sure that, you know, data going in and out of our solutions, depending upon what those solutions are appropriately encrypted. But that's about to change. That's about to change rather drastically. When we start talking about post-quantum computing, I don't like buzzwords, but again, this is going to come up. You know, what are we going to do from a asset protection perspective when we've got IoT devices, we've got OT devices, we've got endpoints, and they need to use certs for connectivity, they need to use certs for encryption. That's a big undertaking. One of our big core things that we're working, one of our big core solutioning we're working on now is more or less rationalization for certificates.
This is the year of PKI.
Yes, it is the year of PKI. Oh God, that's terrible. Yeah, it is definitely a challenge. Again, from a design perspective, it's not terrible. You know, yes, we have to take pretty much everything into consideration. We work with every department that we can. We have to know what's being implemented, how it's being implemented. Again, we're trying to get it from the big picture perspective, but I'll be honest, there's a lot of times where I have to go deep diving and say, why are we doing this? This can cause harm, or this is kind of cool, but it's possibly problematic and there's risk that's involved in it. All right, think we're done?